Okay, so here's a little trick. I created this tutorial a while back, but I didn't have a sound to it, so I was just going to kind of recreate it. But this is kind of what I'm going for. Using this method basically of set-driven keys to kind of control scales and movement for especially like robotical type creatures. Like this creature right here has got like a little expandable neck that comes out. If I've got it moving here. Yeah, kind of like that right there, to make it look like it's moving on the scale. And this basically runs off the same principle as using these set-driven keys. So in 5.8 of the rigging of the robot, we're going to be using this whole method. And what I'm going to do is,
So we went over this a few
not
times.
that one, make this creature here. He's like a little wind-up toy robot, but I don't need to create like a really intricate rig. I just want to be able to, whenever I see the head to move up and down, I want this thing to be able to follow, but I also want it not to just follow like that. I want it to look like it's stretching it out a little bit, the scale, because if you see this object here, you can kind of, it actually looks like it's stretching out like a real pipe would. So the first thing I want to do is my side view. I'm going to move my pivot point down because it's going to stretch from the head. So I'm going to move the pivot point down here. So whenever this thing is following it, it's basically going to stretch its head like that. Just to kind of give this, so if you got an arm or an appendage on your robot that you kind of want to make, or your mechanical object that you want to make, kind of just give the allure. Now I don't want this, I will never animate this head, any further than, probably like this for movement, but it will do the trick in terms of stretching out. Even if you wanted to, it basically probably would follow it, but it depends on how far you set the key state of doing that. So we could stretch it out really far to see how good it looks. So first thing I'm going to do is, I've got all these things aligned where I want them to. This will be my original state. I'm going to squeeze this thing together. This will be my closed mouth. And then I'm going to actually kind of squeeze it together a little bit. So this is a compressed state of it. If you're wondering how I created this, it's just a basic cylinder and I extruded sides. I did get the question that one time to create that thing, and just smooth it over. So first things first, I'm going to delete the history on this stuff. So I am going to use controllers to do this. So I'm going to create a head controller. Freeze the rotation on this one, so I can always return it back to 0. So I'm going to parent the head to the actual head controller, pressing P, because I'm going to set the state of the controller itself. That I'm going to be looking at the attribute that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be translating the Y is going to be the driver to the scale of the Y will be the driven. See my value change over there. So I'm going to go to animation, key, set driven key, set. Your box will come up. So my head controller is the driver. Load my driver. The translate Y attribute. Now my driven is going to be my object here. The neck, well I misspelled it, neck geometry. I want to drive the scale Y of it. So right off the bat, I'm just going to key this state because this is like the compressed state where I want it to be at. So I'm just going to go key this. So now I'm going to adjust it. So let's move this thing up to this state here. Let's see how far we can stretch this neck to where it just doesn't look good. Now I'm going to key another state. There we go. Now I'm going to key this right here. Okay, so let's move this and see if this works. Oh yeah. Got a little bit of bounce to it, which I didn't want, but I'll show you how to adjust that. So this is as far as I would be animating this thing ever. I would never go off the kilter with this. But it kind of gives an even pull. Now what you want to do is look at this object right here. Go to your animation editor, your graph editor. You want to change this to a linear. You don't want this because that's what will give it this kind of ease in, ease out, and we don't really want that with this. So I'm just going to make it straight. There we go. Cool. Now what you can do is basically, how you go about moving this thing in space, because if you move it like that, it's going to move. Well, I'm not ever going to be animating any kind of tilt like that, because this is a one motion thing. If I were going to be doing that, then I would have to go back and key double states of like a bend, and probably actually I would put a bend deformer in this one to make it look right, but I'm just going in and out with this guy here. So what I'm going to do is just create another controller here. This is my body. Close this window here. So now I am going to parent, delete that one, freeze transformation. Now I'm going to parent this controller to this controller by just pressing P. But I've got to worry about this right here. This one's going to follow the head in terms of that, but say if I'm going to animate this thing forward, I need to be able to push, the entire thing forward. So what I'm going to do is connect the body, parent the body, the controller, and then I'm going to parent the neck. Everything is selected, everything moves, but it also, if you move it in space, it will affect that. So you can kind of move this guy here, with a constant animate this thing. Let's key both of these controllers S. Oops. Now let's just move this controller so it follows it. 10 S, and let's like in betweens here we can kind of animate this controller up and down. However we want to, so it gives a little bit of chomping motion across the board. Go really far. And if I were working with legs too, I would have, like the legs going in and out, but I don't really have that with this, so. Jump, 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 jump. Let me just expand all of these out. Jump, 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 jump. So those are kind of a quick little trick how you can just kind of use geometry to drive other objects. Not necessarily, you don't need to create a bunch of bones to make something, inorganic look realistic. This is a good way of kind of understanding those methods in general, but I would suggest using controllers for everything, because that way whenever you keyframe them, you're keying the controllers. So hope this helps maybe for a little trick, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.